Welcome back to our course on Excel 2013. In this section I'd like to quickly cover backup and recovery, or more specifically auto recovery in Excel 2013. And first of all, let me talk a little about backup. When you are working with workbooks in Excel 2013, you're basically working with files, probably mostly kept on your own computer, although you could be keeping them on SkyDrive or on a network drive. But wherever you're keeping those files, wherever you're keeping those workbooks, it is very important that they're part of a backup regime. You should make sure that you regularly take copies of all of the workbooks that have any value to you at all, which is probably the vast majority of them, and make sure that that copy is somewhere else, not on the same device as the original. Now, I'm not going to talk in this section about setting up a backup regime. That should be part of how you look after the digital media that you create and maintain anyway. But this is by way of a reminder to say the workbooks, the Excel 2013 workbooks that you create and maintain, need to be part of whatever your backup regime is. If you haven't got an effective backup regime, I suggest that you get one in place soon. Now, having said that, I would like to quickly point out one little feature in Excel 2013. There is a sort of backup feature, but it's not really what I'm talking about here. Let's suppose you've created, in this case, book 1, you've put some numbers in, and you want to save this particular workbook, and you go into File, Save As. I'm going to save on my computer, go into that folder, etc. When you do a save as, there is an option. There's some tools options here. We're going to look at some of this later on. But amongst the options, their general options include one that says always create backup. Now, what this really means, and I'm not going to go into it in detail here, but what it really means is when you save this particular workbook, an additional copy will be saved, but it will be saved in the same place. So you're not talking about doing some sort of off-site backup somewhere else. It's an additional copy of the same file with a slightly different file extension on it. It's normally an XLK file, and that keeps an additional copy. That means if you accidentally delete the original, the backup copy is there. Now, the point I'm making here is that that isn't the same as having a backup regime. With a backup regime, you have a copy of the files kept somewhere else. Now, the idea of the backup regime is to keep a copy of your important files to cover situations like one where your computer gets stolen, your computer breaks down, or everything just gets accidentally wiped. But that isn't the only situation you need to cater for. And another situation which happens too frequently, perhaps not as frequently as it used to, but it still happens, is that Excel itself fails, your computer fails, the power goes, something happens whereby partway through working on a particular workbook, everything goes wrong, and potentially you're going to lose all of the work that you've done, say, in the last hour or two. Now, Excel provides a very specific facility to deal with this, and it's called Auto-Save and Auto-Recover. And the principle of Auto-Save and Auto-Recover is that periodically, when you're working on one or more workbooks, Excel takes a copy of the work, puts it somewhere safe, and then if something horrible happens, if there's a catastrophe such as Excel itself failing, power failure if you're using a PC, some other disaster occurs, you can go back to the last auto-saved version of your workbook. Now, there is a load on the system in doing this, and you have to achieve a balance. You have to say, well, how often do I want Excel to make a copy of what I'm doing? And I need to balance that against the fact that if I told Excel, say, to do this every hour, I could lose 59 minutes worth of work. By default, Excel sets this up to happen every 10 minutes. So let's see how we can set this period for autosave. Into Backstage View, into the options, and the page we want within options is Save, and it's really the top section here, Save Workbooks. Now, the first important option here is this one, Save Auto Recover Information every 10 minutes. You can put that down to 1 minute or up to 120 minutes, And the next checkbox, the one within that, keep the last autosave version if I close without saving. Now, when you close a workbook and you're asked if you want to save the changes, most people at some stage have accidentally said no when they meant yes, or have said no and then realized at some later point, oh dear, I should have saved that last round of changes. Now, what Excel will do if you have this box checked is that it will keep the last autosave version even if you've said don't save. So if you subsequently discover that you should have, you can still recover. The next option here is the auto recover file location. Excel sets up a default for you. It's in my case users Toby A, and then there's a subfolder app data, and then roaming, and then Microsoft, and then Excel. That's the default really for Excel. You could put those auto recovery files in a different location if you wanted to. You can also, much further down the options here, you can specify that in a particular workbook you can disable auto recovery just for that workbook. If for some reason when you're working on a particular workbook you don't need auto recovery, there can be a number of reasons for this. One of them being that if there's an element of automation in it anyway, you may provide your own auto recovery features as part of what you're doing, or indeed the Excel auto recovery may conflict with what you're doing. So for normal circumstances, the key things here, you probably don't need to change the auto recover file location. You should have a thought about this frequency of 10 minutes, and I would suggest that you keep this on, and probably the time is the only thing you need to change. So that's a run through backup, autosave, auto recovery. I'll see you in the next section.